Hello, everyone. Um, so excited for everyone to be joining. I think we're just going to get started. So nice to see everyone. And welcome to Gen Z and Impact. I'm really excited to be a part of this conference. My name is Aleksija Vujicic, and I'm an MBA to NYU Stern and also an MBA associate at Female Founders Fund. Today, as the name of the panel implies, we're going to be speaking about a topic that I'm super passionate about. Gen Z and specifically their impact on the future, their vision, and the way that they kind of see and are building the world. And we are very lucky to have two experts in that space who I will let introduce themselves. So Meagan, if you would like to come.
Hi, everyone. My name is Meagan. I am Meagan Loyst. I am an investor at Lear Hippo. We are the most active early stage investors in New York. And on top of that, I'm also the founder of Gen Z VCs, which is the largest and fastest growing community for young people in tech and VC. We have 11,000 plus members now in the community, which I started less than a year ago. Tons of initiatives and holistically aim to make VC and tech more accessible and welcoming for the next generation while empowering Gen Z voices. So that's a little bit about me.
Yeah, thanks, Meagan. And Bohan, founder and CEO of Buzzer. Prior to starting Buzzer in January of 2020, I know an ideal time to start a company. Was at Twitter for 7 years. As Meagan mentioned, Lear Hippo was our seed investor. And we just about 4 months ago closed our Series A, and Gen Z VC was part of our Series A. And so there's a lot of shared connections here. As you can see, I am obviously not Gen Z, but I love that generation. They are kingmakers of platforms of the future. And that is why I have really partnered up with Meagan in listening to her and her community on products that they need, that they want. And so we can talk a little bit more about how we have sought to create a product rooted from empathy. But it's wonderful to be here, and thanks again for having me.
It is so wonderful to be able to talk with both of you. In case that wasn't clear from their introductions, both of them are deeply immersed in everything to do with this generation, from investing in to building communities with. And Meagan is Gen Z, so am I. So at least 2/3 of us are representing. There's a reason that Gen Z is becoming as kind of focused as they are in mainstream culture right now. Not only are they quickly rising as one of the largest segments of the population, but their spending power is increasing, and so is, in tandem, their voice. I think the entire generation is becoming louder and louder, metaphorically speaking, and are really having an impact on the way that we build the future. I think the best way to start off would be with kind of a broad question for both of you as we begin to understand why is Gen Z having the outsized impact that they seem to be having on modern day society? And then how can we describe that impact? Like, what is Gen Z's vision for for the future in both of your opinions? So Meagan, let's start with you and then we can go to Bo.
Great. Yeah. I mean, I think we have such a unique sort of moment in time opportunity now, which I think is quite interesting because when you think about like, who is Gen Z, right? Aleksija and I are both Gen Z, as we mentioned. The oldest cohort of Gen Zers are 25, 26, like 1995 is kind of the cutoff. And that means like, think about where you are in that time in your life. You are graduating from college, you are in college, you're like joining the workforce for the first time. You really have your own independent spending power for the first time. And when you look at the numbers, it's massive, right? Like Gen Z is 35% of the global population, $143 billion in spending power. And the way that we grew up, particularly with technology, connects us in a really unique way that's different from, I think, prior generations, especially with COVID, where everyone was not only living online, but working online, learning online, doing like shopping online in more ways than we had been before. We just congregate differently, we spend differently, and I think we also just have different ideals holistically. And like the planet that we inherited is dying. Like, how do we fix that? How do we take action against it? How do we embed impact every single thing that we're doing every day, whether it's like the products that we're supporting and the brands that we're supporting, or like just recycling I think it's the way that Gen Z thinks about like our impact on the world, the impact on our workforce, and like the way that we use technology is just fundamentally different because of the time that we grew up like with iPhones, with Snapchat, with TikTok. Like everything is just online, and there's a whole new set of expectations that kind of come with that. But I know Bo is obviously intimately familiar with this as well, so I'll turn it over to him.
Yeah, as Megan just articulated, Gen Z are very much value-led consumers, right? And so for any startup founder out there that's looking to create a company or a business that caters to that generation, it's really important to start out with your mission, your why, right? And so Buzzer is just a quick blurb about Buzzer. Buzzer is a mobile-first notification-based platform that you're able to access live moments in sports through a micropayment, right? And so imagine if you're a huge New York Knicks fan and the Lakers are in town, and if a game is coming down to the wire and LeBron James has the ball and there's only 2 minutes in the fourth quarter, you can buy that moment live for 99 cents, right? And the current state of the sports industry or media in general is that the industry really does optimize for a medium where Gen Z is not present, which is mobile, right? Everything is optimized for television, right? And so just recall the last time you sat in front of a television and watched a full game, specifically for Gen Z. It's very rare, right? And when live sports rights remain to be the most valuable IP in the entire sports ecosystem, and yet your future generation is just consuming highlights and clips that are optimized for TikTok, Snapchat, Twitter, Instagram, that becomes a very problematic trend for the future of your business, right? How are you engaging with them live? Back to the whole notion around value-led, right? Sports, we can all agree, is a community product. What we are doing at Buzzer is we're utilizing data to identify moments to bring people together. And so taking a step back, it's really important for us to really embody community in what we do, in our mission, right? And so as I mentioned before, I started Buzzer in January of 2020, not knowing what was going to happen 2 months ahead of us. And we had, as all of us can remember, the entire world shut down in March of 2020. We are currently still living through a global health crisis, but we also went through a social and racial reckoning in this country, right? And one of the moments that I personally had was we had raised a seed funding round in the millions that was led by Larry Hippo. And I kind of sat by myself and really kind of thought about what do I do? How do I deploy this capital that I had raised during a pandemic? One, I offered to give it away back, I meant. Two is I only hired people that were impacted, laid off or furloughed due to the pandemic, right? And so our first 11 employees were that, right? And so for us, it's like, how do I become a active citizen in terms of giving back to the community and really embody community? And then the third thing is the first product that we shipped had nothing to do with sports, had everything to do with community. We operated a 500 student, 500 mentorship program called Strive. And Strive is now the core of what we do, is the lens, it is the of whatever we build is the foundation of what we do. I bring that up because foundation is very important, right? What you stand for and the values you stand for is very important. And we all know that sports is not only a community product, but also a unifier and equalizer, right? And so how do we use that as a tool to move people's hearts, right? And so, so Strive is now reflected in our cap table, in our business model, where we're allocating 1% of our cap table, 1% of our net profits are dedicated towards furthering advancing communities of color, specifically the Black community, the Latinx community, as well as the AAPI community. And then we're also asking for customer participation where folks are able to round up 1% of their micropayment for content that they consume on a daily basis. So again, when we're talking about Gen Z, we're talking about value-led investors or value-led consumers.
I think you can be an honorary Gen Z now, Bo.
Thank you. Thank you. I will gladly shave 10 years out of my age to join you guys.
Fine. You already look like it. It's fine. It's fine. Both of you, what you just said leads me to so many questions, but I think I will start with, if both of you could sum up the top 1 to 3 values that you believe Gen Z focuses on the most really quickly, what would those be? Meagan, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think number one, honestly, is authenticity. And I think that needs to be reflected in, it can't just be like, I think where brands go wrong is like this idea of like greenwashing, where it's like, I need to like, oh, if I donate X% of my proceeds to XYZ cause, like people will appreciate it. And like, that's fine. It's like, no, Gen Z sees through all of the bullshit, like truly. You need to be super authentic in every single way that your consumer interacts with your brand. That means the way that, like, what does your cap table look like? What does your executive team look like? How are you building a diverse workforce? How are you giving back to the causes that are integral to your mission? Like, I mean, Buzzer's, again, a perfect example of that personified. Another example in our portfolio is a company called Parade. I'm a Gen Z consumer and I spend an ungodly amount of money with Parade. They're basically reinventing the American underwear story for Gen Z. And what I love about it is like, I know when I'm like buying underwear, buying bralettes, whatever it is from Parade, like a percentage of the proceeds are going to Planned Parenthood. They use recycled materials. They have underwear that's actually carbon net neutral that you can like add to your cart. And also like when you look at their models, they're reflective of us, like our generation. It's diverse. It's all sizes. It's not like the Victoria's Secret that I grew up like looking at those girls being like, I will never look like that. And like, it's more reflective of like what the authentic Gen Z consumer looks like, and everything that they do reflects that. So I think one, in my opinion, at least, is authenticity all the way. The second piece is definitely impact. I think what's great about Gen Z is that I think any individual feels like they have the ability to make like change. It's not like you have to like one person can move mountains kind of mentality, and there's a bias towards action. And so I think like being able to sort of like have that impact be manifested in your company by listening to your customers and empowering your customers is also really important. The third, those are honestly the top two that top with two, but I'll turn it over to Bo because he might have some more interesting things to say on it.
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost for us, it's transparency, right? We are very clear of what we believe in, what we represent, and our cap table. Later in the new year, we're going to publish our diversity numbers, our makeup, right? Employee makeup. And you know what? It might make people uncomfortable. Good. That's where change comes from, right? And so I want all of our hiring managers and every single teammate that we have, that when we look at those numbers, we should be wanting to own it, right? And if we don't want to own it, then make a change for it, right? Second is accountability, right? Is say what you're going to do, right? Or do what you're going to say, right? And then third, to be a little bit more lighthearted, make it simple and fun, right? It's something that every generation enjoys, but I think for Gen Z, it's been all about simplicity. How do you make my life simple, right? I think that Gen Z has gotten a bad rap because no one wants to watch a full-length game saying, oh, they struggle with attention. And I'm like, Gen Z are binge-watching Squid Game, on Netflix, right? It's that you have to cut through the noise. They just have way too much choice, right? And so how are you presenting these choices in a way that is very simple and value add to them, right? And then lastly is don't piss them off. I mean, I think lastly is don't piss them off. Like, and to the point about authenticity, right? Is that, we're not talking about children here. We're talking about very informed consumers that are value led, that care more about what they buy and what they represent, right? And what that does to the environment, right? And so I think that we need to really think about, I think, an impactful, when I saw the AMC stonks, on Reddit, I was like, wow, like they can move markets, right? And so for me, it's like, how do you include them from the very beginning? And so when I saw the AMC stonks happen, it inspired me to include them on the cap table, It's like for them to own a piece of our company and what we're building so that they feel ownership, because at the end of the day, Gen Z right now are kingmakers. They king made TikTok, they king made Snapchat, but how many Gen Z, consumers have gotten in at the ground level of these companies? Not a lot, right? And so, again, to what Meagan has said is like, how do we project and represent authenticity? And in our ways is include them in the foundation, include them in the very beginning.
I think absolutely to your point, which still astounds me. I think because we spend so much time in this space, it's hard for me to even understand. But Gen Z is still often underestimated, largely due to their age. But when you look at the impact that they've had on broader society and culture, it is all stemming from Gen Z, and it's kind of almost grassroots in the sense it's coming from the ground up, and it's due to the fact that they have very strong values, the ones that you both pointed out, and they are willing to enact change on behalf of those. It's where they put their dollars, it's where they put their attention, and because there's such a large portion of the population, they're able then to kind of push that agenda forward. So as we think, as like now that we kind of have worked through who Gen Z is, like who the Gen Z consumer is and what they value, both of you have really been successful in building communities that are made by and made for Gen Z. So how have you thought about building those communities? What's been really integral in making them a success? And then what have you seen the impact then on the Gen Zs in your community have been like as a result of that? Again, we'll just go Meagan and then Bo every time. We'll make it simple.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, I think the first, like when you start a community or like when you're building community within your startup as a founder, like whatever it may be, you need to start with like a problem. Like, I think that's like the key thing is like, what is this unique thing that is bringing all these people together? And like, how do you make it front and center? So like for me, Gen Z VCs started actually from an article that I wrote. I was living at home at the time. For context, I'm 24. This is like I'm 2 years post-grad out of college. Like I'm not what the typical investor looks like by any means. And that's not a bad thing. But I think a year ago, even it was like reflected very differently in like the eyes of the venture world. And so I didn't know any of my peers. I had like no friends in VC. I wasn't meeting founders in person because I was living in my parents' house on Long Island. Like it was just like, it was hard to meet people. And so I had this idea where, as the only Gen Z member of my team, the youngest by a factor of 10 years, like I had a unique perspective, even despite of that. Like we would meet Gen Z companies and they'd be like, oh, Meagan, like you're the target customer. Like, why don't you meet them and see what you think? And I was like, okay, like cool. Like this is like me adding value to my team just by being the target user. And what I found was when I interviewed 71 of my peers all over the world, Gen Zers at college funds, investing full time, starting their own funds, that other people had similar like viewpoints, but more importantly, they wanted to meet other people. They were like, oh my God, I also don't know anyone. Like I started my job a month ago. Like, can you connect us? And I was like, great, I'll start a Slack group. It wasn't even, I had no intention to start a giant community or movement or like whatever Gen Z VCs has become. I was literally just solving a problem for my friends. And it grew though, because like I put a lot of thought into the curation very early in the community. Like all the people that were in the Slack group really wanted to be there and were asking for it. And I knew exactly what they wanted. They were like, we want connection. We want to meet other people. And so that was the first thing I did. I did like a little meetup. And I think those like that like early connection to like the Gen Z VC's brand and what we were about, even before we were anything, mattered. And so when I opened up the community just a few days later, we went from 30 people to 1,000 in 4 days. And that was because I was very forward by being like, hey, I started this Slack group. Initially, it was just for my friends that I met in VC, but then I thought about it. Like, there's tons of other people that are investors or students or founders that are looking for connection, just started their jobs and have like no dedicated place to congregate, to learn, to grow together, specifically for young people. And so it just immediately resonated and it grew like instantly. And I think one thing that I did very early on was like I had tons of people reaching out to me with like ideas and things that they wanted to do. And I empowered people in the community to build alongside me. It wasn't like it's not Meagan's community. It's Gen Z VCs, and people buy into the mission and they buy into the fact that like, oh my God, I'm a Gen Z VC too. Like, how can I help? How can I help empower, like move this movement forward? And that's why it's continued to grow the way that it has. Like at the end of the day, Gen Z VCs is a Slack group. the reason it's like a community and a movement and an identity for young investors is because of that buy-in you get from everyone in the community, where they're like, you know what, like, she's right. Like, I'm Gen Z. I have a unique perspective. Even if I'm not a traditional investor, it doesn't matter. Like, my perspective matters to founders. We matter in the impact that we're making on our industry. And that's that. And so I think biggest lessons on my end, at least in terms of building community, is like, listen to your target user. I would say start very curated and like that problem that you're really solving, and then just like be on the ground building with the people that you're solving these problems for.
Meagan, you found product market fit. Sorry to interrupt, but like that is the epitome of product market fit.
Absolutely.
It was quite instant. Yeah, it was crazy. But yeah, Bo, go ahead. Take it away.
No. Also, it was kind of the perfect storm, right? Where everything was shut down. We were all in our homes, and everyone is actively looking for community, right? And connection, right? And so I think that, not only product market fit, but also Meagan hit it at the right time, right? And the one thing that I always say to my team is right product, right team, right time, and all three of it needs to line up. And building off of what Meagan just said in terms of solving a problem, right? I mentioned before I was at Twitter for 7 years, and one of the phenomena I saw is that when there are exciting moments that are happening live, and it doesn't even have to be a game, it could be the final rose ceremony at the Bachelorette or Bachelor, right? It's trending on Twitter, right? And if you're tuned in or watching the game or the show, great, good for you. It makes a very interesting second screen experience. But if not, and I think all of us have experienced this in one way or the other, we experience the sense of urgency of FOMO of like, where's the nearest TV? Where's the nearest sports bar? What channel is it part of? What subscription is it part of? And guess what? By the time you figure all that out, it's done, right? And so there is a generation, Gen Z has namely been the house of highlights or overtime generation, where you're just consuming highlights and clips that are optimized for Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, and TikTok. And it's not because Gen Z doesn't like sports or anything live. It's just that we've made it so damn inconvenient for them to tune into anything live, right? Look at other aspects of entertainment and content. Look at gaming. It's all live, right? And so, where an entire generation really values immediacy. Immediacy is honestly have become a form of social currency, right? It's like, it's not about you getting it, it's when you get it, right? It's how you get to, how quickly you get to it, right? And again, it's all about simplicity and convenience. And so for us, the industry has kind of looked at it saying, well, Gen Z is not interested in live sports. And I was like, have you asked them? They are some of them are just pirating it off of, Reddit streams. Like, it's not that hard to find. Sports piracy is a $28 billion global problem. That is a signal that the industry is doing a better job of keeping audience out than keeping content in, right? And so for us, we wanted to solve a small problem of how do we essentially build that last mile technology for live and ephemeral moments in sports with anyone that's interested in that moment, right? And so as anyone does, like, we sought out to kind of ask our community, inform our community. We did it on Discord, and we created a buzzer Discord, which we have in the thousands, in partnership with Gen Z VC. They've helped us out a ton, and we just kept an open channel. And in most nights, it's just sports talk. It's like the world's largest sports bar, where they just talk about it. And for me, it's like, what if you're in this sports bar and you can't see the TV? What do you do? That's where buzzer kind of comes into play, right? And so I've said this before. I've used Discord as LinkedIn. We've hired 3 people over Discord. The most vocal folks, I DM'd them and I said, do you want to come and work for us? And they're like, is this a joke? I'm like, no, you're very opinionated and a lot of your opinions are very spot on. It's like, I'm critical of you guys. I'm like, exactly. That's why I want you to join our squad, right? Because you care. And so I think that we have to seek out new and unconventional ways to foster community. We've obviously done that with Discord, but also we've hired off of Discord, which we have been very, happy about. So it's good.
I am embarrassed to say that as a Gen Z, I still have not figured out Discord. It's the one platform that just remains very elusive. That'll be the next step in my journey, is getting on it.
I get so much flack from people that Gen Z VCs is on Slack. They're like, "Are you even Gen Z? Like, why did you?" And I'm like, "Guys, I'm like, I didn't intend to start a community. I used Slack at my old job, so I was like, that's what I knew." But people always come for me. They're like, "Why isn't this on Discord?" Yeah, it's very funny.
Slack. It's like okay, we can get on Discord together. We'll form a one-on-one chat. I don't even know if they have those, but we can make one.
We can just hop in the Buzzer chat. We can just hop in Buzzer's Discord.
Yeah, I'll invite you both. I mean, Megan's already in, but I'll invite you right after this. Yeah.
Perfect. I feel like by nature of everything we've been speaking about, we've kind of already identified how a founder can build a product that is meaningful for Gen Z. But I would like to flip it around a little bit because I know, Bo, you've spoken at length about your culture at Buzzer, and then Meagan, as a Gen Z employee of a company, I would love to know kind of what Gen Z is looking for from the workplace and how a founder can build a company for Gen Z employees. Bo, actually, let's start with you this time. Why not?
Okay, yeah. As Meagan said in the very beginning, in terms of values, be authentic, right? And I think we said this in the green room. It's like my priority. I grew up in. My dad's a pastor. So I grew up in the church, and one of the things that my dad has always taught me is if he can't minister to his own kid, how is he going to minister in the community? And I truly believe in that. For me, it's if I can't be a leader in my own family, my own relationships, then how can I be a leader elsewhere, right? And so one of the things that I've really encouraged our employees, where half of our team is Gen Z, is hey, like be good to your parents, be good to your partner. Right? Because if you're a poor partner, to your parents or to people that are significant in your life, you're going to be a bad partner to me eventually. Right? And so I will say that we have this cohort of fans called Buzzer Moms, which is the moms of our teammates. They have kind of like come together and they like chime in on everything. They send me DMs about like how proud they are. I'm like, I was like, thank you, but you should send this to your daughter and son. They're like, oh, we do that too. I'm just proud of you too, And so I've somehow become their child. But it's something that I think is really important because anyone can be a cool brand. I think with the right amount of marketing dollars, anyone can be a cool brand, right? How you sustain that is where the culture comes in, right? And so I've heard multiple times now where people just like reach out to me and say, hey, like Buzzer is my dream job. And I'm like, why? Like get better goals for dreams, And they're like, because it's like, it just seems like you guys have so much joy and fun and you guys are authentic. And I was like, thank you. Yeah, we are, we are having fun. And so many people, another thing that I say to our team is like, there is a get to job and a got to job. And we get to do this. Like, it's not like, oh, I got to do this. No, we get to do this, and we have teammates at multiple times during the week saying, man, I can't believe I get to do this as a job. I get to do this for work. Right. And so how do we optimize our environment to do that? And also like, we're all at home right now, right? We're all working from home. And so the home life and the work life has really converged. So knowing that, like, how we keep our teammates happy, is also going to impact their happiness at home as well, right? And so for me as a founder, and it's a big responsibility, but also I know that like if our teammates are happy at work, they're also happy at home. And so for me, like that is a great responsibility, but something that I don't take lightly and something that's very, very important.
Is it true that every member of your team also has a gratitude journal?
Yes, we do. We also have a 15-minute team huddle called just based off of gratitude. And we started 19 months ago. And I just mindlessly started saying, hey, let's not talk about COVID. Let's not talk about all the bad stuff that's happening out in the world. Let's just focus on just like what we're grateful for. And sometimes it's like, what dessert are we grateful for? And it gets really deep into our family, our upbringings. But the center of everything we do is just gratitude. And 19 months later, we still have those team models every day. And we all go around and facilitate. And that's something that I'm very proud of because that is the heart and, the foundation of our culture, which is gratitude. Yeah.
Love that. I also gratitude journal. Meagan?
Yeah, I think if I wasn't working in VC, there's like no other company I could ever work for other than Buzzer. Like I'm like a wholehearted believer in that. Like I think like that just like when you were like in my head I was like, Bo, are you hiring? Like I just like, it just like the way like it comes, I think at the end of the day, like it comes from the top, right? It's like how you make people feel and how you listen, I think is also like a big part. But I think like when you think about Gen Z as a generation, like we talked about impact, we talked about authenticity, like Gen Z is also extremely entrepreneurial. Like 42% of Gen Zers want to start their own business one day. I think if you don't give like Gen Z the space to like be creative and like be heard and like involve them in conversations in different ways, like it's going to be very difficult for them to thrive. And I think sometimes like some people are better than that than others, but like I think having some semblance of that I think is really important. I'll give a quick anecdote. So a few weeks ago, we held Lear Hippo and Gen Z VCs together hosted the first Gen Z VC summit. And that started from literally in like a 5 a.m. Like any of my ideas are always just like ridiculous things. I wake up in the middle of the night and I'm like I have like a vision, like Raven Simone, like I'm like, this needs to happen. And so I had like I woke up in the middle of the night and I was like, there needs to be like a summit. Like I was like, it needs to happen. So I sent my partner, Kenny, who works very closely with Bo at Buzzer and was like the first, like he wrote the check Buzzer. I was like, Kenny, I have this idea. Like I have this great community. We invest in great Gen Z companies at LH, but I haven't seen a single event organized by Gen Z for Gen Z that tackles the problems that I hear every day as a young investor, that I hear from young founders. I'm like, I feel like there's a real opportunity to bring everyone together in a way that's like very authentic to Gen Z VCs. And like Kenny could have been like, that's ridiculous. Like, that's silly. That'd take a lot of work. Your job is not to like organize events. But he was like, I think his email was like, needs to happen. Call me. Like at like 6 a.m. Like that was Kenny listening to me, youngest person on our team, like newest person on our team, and like hearing me out and being like, yeah, this is a great idea. Like I walked him through my thinking. And then like 6 months later, it happened. We had 3,000 plus attendees from 71 countries all the world. I had like 100 plus campus ambassadors that I was working with, like tons of students, like, and it was a great event. I think if you were it was September 17th. I think if you were on Twitter and you didn't see anything about the summit, like it was like very hard to avoid. Let's just say that. And like, that was purely like just an idea and being heard by like the most senior partner at our fund that was like, Meagan has good ideas. I want to work with Meagan. Like, let's make it happen. And that's why I love working at Lear Hippo. I love like my job, but I also love the way that they make me feel empowered. That like, if there are things that should be changed or things that should exist, like they hear me out. They give me space to like pursue those ideas, which I think is great. And like, I'm an investor full time at Lear Hippo, and I'm also the founder of this like crazy community. Like they empower me to be able to do both. And I think every Gen Z or over the next decade is going to have a side hustle of like in some ways. Like it's just we're very entrepreneurial, and so I think like hearing those ideas, living by your values, having it come from the top, and like your management style is super important. Like I think one thing that I'm very adamant about is like if you are just thinking that like putting ping pong tables and like free snacks in your office is gonna like retain Gen Z, not true. It's not gonna work. It's like literally it's the way that you make your employees feel heard every day and the way that you empower them every day. The other stuff is like a nice to have, but the moment you kind of lose that like buy-in and like that buy-in is the moment you lose your team.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I also am a Gen Z employee and second everything that you said. I also was at the Gen Z conference and on Twitter that day and can confidently say that there was no hiding from Gen Z VC on Twitter in the Twitter VC universe. Okay, so we're kind of getting close to the end, but I think that an interesting way to end that is something that I don't think really is ever spoken about when we talk about Gen Z, because obviously we're so positive. Everyone's so bullish on this generation for very great reasons. But I wonder, do either of you see any challenges that this generation is going to have to face in the coming years that they'll have to overcome, and what are they?
I'm happy to start. I mean, I think like collectively figuring out the climate crisis is like, that's like not something that falls on the weight of like an individual, but like I think everyone is thinking about the climate in a bunch of different ways. So that's like one thing. I think also just like we're living in just like an entirely new world post COVID, like in the way that we work and the way that we live, and like figuring out what that healthy balance looks like by like, you know, Gen Z is going to be driving some of those conversations, but it's also going to come from everywhere. And so I think like figuring out how to blend and make that happen versus like, because I think again, Gen Z is all about going against the status quo and like defying norms and odds and whatever that may be. But I do think there has to be a happy balance, because I think when Gen Z gets a bad rap, it's around like they're like this sense of entitlement, like, oh, like Gen Z has to do things their way, like they think a certain way and it has to be that, like whatever. But like I think the moment you start thinking like I think it's going to be a little bit of like, how do we like bring that narrative back and like be able to like do what we're told, do all the things, but also have that same like fire and entrepreneurial spirit and impact and all that kind of stuff, and like merging them together, because I do think it's a thin line more often than not.
Yeah, I mean, this is from the outside looking in. I'm a millennial, so one of the things that I think is a challenge, but also a great challenge, is how do you channel their passion, right? So rather than telling them no, it's like, how do you steer them in a way that is productive for everyone, right? And so I think balance is very important. And I tell folks, you know, Wednesday we launched our public product, right? And I said, hey, Wednesday is day one, but Thursday is day one too, and Friday is day one, right? Every day is day one. I was like, let's be 1-0 every day. Meaning, it's great that you show up and you just put in 18 hours. Thank you. But how are you sustaining that? Like, what are you going to be when you sleep 3? Like, let's not be a culture that celebrates no sleep. I don't. You know, like, yes, I slept more. I'm sleeping more now than I ever have. And I'm a startup founder, you know, a Series A startup founder. I sleep 7-8 hours. You know, I go on vacations and I'm open about it, because I tell my team, I'm like, you have to balance, you know, and you have to take care of yourself, right? Secondly, I don't think this is a more commentary around Gen Z, but just our country in general, is everything is politicized now, right? You know, everything is there is a political stance. And so for me in general is just, let's start out with the human level, you know, and I think that is very important. You know, we live in an unfortunate society where saying stop AAPI hate or Black Lives Matter, you know, or stop trans hate are political statements. Like, why are they political statements? They are an acknowledgement of someone's humanity, right? And so I just truly believe, you know, is that if we can create the ideal society in our own company, then hopefully we see a reflection of that, you know, outside, right? And my biggest drive and my biggest passion is to show the next generation that wins and values are not mutually exclusive. You can do both, and you can do both of them really, really well, right? And so if Buzzer succeeds, hopefully people will copy our formula and copy the way we did it, because we unfortunately live in a society where, you know, I'm very careful about a founder-driven culture. I refuse to have one, because my own enemy is myself, is my ego. We're all human beings, right? And I call myself all the time, you know, to my team, you know, is that when I get overly dominant, I'm like, you have to check me. You have to keep me accountable. And I think that the less we can glorify individuals, you know, and you can guess we glorify certain people, right? How do we move away from that paradigm, right? And really kind of create more of a community-centric culture. And again, it starts, you know, again, from the inside. And hopefully we'll see that change on the outside once we do.
I think what's really interesting is, even in asking you both about the challenges that are facing Gen Z, the challenges that you both kind of discussed are actually such global challenges. I would say from climate to COVID to just like kind of politics. And yet it's Gen Z that's been the generation that's poised, I think, to overcome those and will be the ones that kind of solve it, which I think is actually really uplifting and is the perfect way to end this conversation, actually, is generally just the power of Gen Z to shape the future. So thank you both so much for going through this conversation and all of the insights that you both have. And I am leaving feeling very empowered, as part of this community. I'm very, very excited. And thank you also to the Future Proof Tech Conference for having the three of us and for letting me lead this conversation. I feel like I've learned so much.
Well, thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks so much. Had such a great time. And founders, if you have questions, my email is just meagan@learhippo.com. So we're always looking to work with great founders who are building impactful businesses. So really appreciate the time, and thank you, Aleksija, for moderating.
Thank you.